Going back eons into the ether of ancient history, the existence of the soul has long been debated by theocrats, philosophers, and those that argue that such a thing can't exist without definitive, solid, scientific proof. An intangible, mystical energy, one that has never actually been detected or measured by modern or ancient human beings in a physical sense. You would think that by now scientists would have detected an apparent energy that is bound within us. Is it just the electrical impulses that don't leave our brains until minutes after we're dead? Can it simply be boiled down to possessing empathy and a moral compass? Why is the idea of a soul so overused in ancient and modern stories to describe a journey of redemption, or truth of self perhaps? Is the soul something that can be obtained like an object, or does it completely transcend understanding by modern science and technology? Does it really exist, or does it really only exist in our minds? Often representing the individuality and humanity of one person, the soul is a non-material spark, a supposed driver of what is otherwise a corporeal human body. It's worth mentioning that the conceptualized idea didn't even really exist until a few thousand years ago, when philosophers and religious theocrats began to attribute souls to all living things, but especially to themselves. When it comes to the definition, it depends on who you ask and when. Generally regarded as a composition of light, emotion, character, and thinking, the soul is a comforting thought to most. Before recorded times, when literacy did not exist, people communicated their belief by praying for the souls of animals that they killed, this being a tradition that was passed on in Native American tribes like the Cherokee, who believed that plants and animals also possess spiritual power. In some ancient shamanistic traditions, it was seen to be seated at the abdomen of the body. It could drift into the spirit world during slumber, delirium, and death. Early thought on the idea led many to speculate that people didn't have one soul, but numerous souls that could manifest themselves in a variety of ways and also be lost. Components of these non-material objects could be damaged as individuals made their way through their lives. Physical illness was often viewed as the loss of one's soul, and healing that person would sometimes involve rites aimed at restoring it in order to fully restore the patient for a full recovery. In Hinduist tradition, probably one of the earliest recorded religions on the planet, some of which was handed down by Sanskrit tablets, the self, or Atma, is deep inside each of us and witnesses everything. It is a living being that is part of a larger infrastructure of living beings called the Paramatma, or Supreme Consciousness. Hinduism believes that who you are now is a result of karma and reincarnation. Those who do bad in their current life suffer in the next, whereas those who are selfless and perform good actions will come back in their next life happy. This idea of an ecosystem of souls that are judged by action is repeated in numerous other religions, but not to the same exact specifications. Belief in reincarnation also comprises the building blocks of Eastern religions like Buddhism and Confucianism, which says that people can move from one physical body to the next after death. Ancient civilizations like Egypt and China were the first ones to formalize the concept on a mass scale. Being among the first recorded major civilizations in the world, strangely, they both also conceived of the idea of a dual soul. This is the idea that people have two souls, one that leaves the body upon death, and one that either remains near the recently dead or disappears entirely when mortality is reached, turning into a free or wandering soul. It is interesting to note that Egypt is 4,274 miles away from China, and Chinese civilization came about only roughly 1,000 to 3,000 years after Egypt's formal emergence. While Egypt regarded the afterlife as transferable, able to be stored in a picture or statue, for example, the ancient Chinese were responsible for the creation of many Eastern religions, one being Taoism, which taught each human had 10 souls, 3 Hun and 7 Po, representing the yin and the yang. When one soul was lost, it would equate to mental illness or disability, while a dead person may reincarnate. Burial rituals would enshrine an individual as an object of ancestor worship in both traditions. While not totally similar, these ideologies are similar in that they both share the idea of soul transmission, the idea that they can move from one place to another, often supposedly stored in stone or in works of masonry. Fast forward thousands of years. As monotheistic religions like Judaism came about, the notion also came about that the body and soul were somehow one and the same. It is worth noting here that while Judaism is around 3,500 years old, modern scientists within the last few decades have steadily been coming to the realization that mental health is related to physical health. Teaching that the body was created by God to do his divine work, the soul is the everlasting part of a person, and Jewish tradition says that God breathed the first soul into Adam, and that man was the first living soul. Not a stranger to hardship in history, most Jews believe that the body and pleasures of the physical world undermine this gift from God, and that only through challenge and truth can a person realize their own full spiritual power. When Jews celebrate the life of a deceased member of their congregation, it is called a yahrzeit, not a birthday, but an anniversary of death in remembrance and acknowledgement of a personal struggle in this physical world. Christianity introduced adherents to the idea that God would judge souls. Not only did it represent immortal life, but they were also met with the question of quality. The pureness of a human soul, when compared to, say, Jesus Christ, could be based on the choices that you made during the course of your life. You were either deemed acceptable for heaven or acceptable for hell, a place of damnation and torment. Christian theocrats also attempted to explore the origins of the human soul, questioning whether God created them or whether they existed in the first place. These beliefs can perhaps be best contrasted with another monotheistic religion like Islam, where individual schools of thought overlap, but center around the idea that death puts the soul in a different dimension of existence entirely. In Islamic belief, upon death, a soul survives and undergoes changes beyond death, similar to heavenly rewards and paradise, limbo, or a state of perpetual hell based on choices related to sin. One thing that connects all of these is that they are all beliefs. But what does science have to say about these beliefs? We like to believe that we can live on in some form as humans, uncertain of our own fate beyond our mortal lives. It's commonplace to take comfort in the idea of us being eternal in some way, shape, or form. While the definition of what the soul is appears to be different to those with different belief systems, and while delving into the beliefs of everyone may be too much to itemize in a single video, where is the hard science that substantiates any of this? The short answer is that no proof currently exists. Religious views do not represent solid scientific proof, but it does give us a basic idea of what the soul should be according to thousands of years of thought on the subject. While some religions outright admit that the soul is essentially undetectable, the challenge here is to display undeniable proof of its existence. Unfortunately, this is a feat that has yet to be met with a sufficient answer to such a large question, making it very easy for an atheist or a scientist to argue that the lack of empirical evidence leads to the natural conclusion. However, we can always dig a little deeper and perhaps come to a more practical answer, an answer that science can eventually agree with. It is no secret that religion and science are at odds with one another. Belief and hard proof are two entirely different things. The future of physics, however, might shed some light on the issue. While there may be no controlled information on the subject for the time being, science's grasp on mystical issues could certainly be stunted for that very reason. Even a scientist will admit that modern scientific and technological advancements can only take us so far in our quest for knowledge. Not able to fully comprehend how there could be a soul without electrons and atoms going through a significant change, does it go beyond or perhaps beneath what observable science teaches, if it even exists at all? Quantum theory, for example, may eventually prove that quantum information can exist outside bodies, undetectable to modern science and needing some sort of new physics to prove substantially. The idea of quantum displacement, for example, that is, information being able to move seamlessly from one place to another, or another dimension, is still at this point just a theory. Future neuroscience may also be useful in the search for a soul, in that our brains have the equivalent of fingerprints called connectome. This does prove that we are all wired differently, both physiologically and mentally. Could mapping the human brain lead us to its existence finally? We also have unique neurosynaptic signatures and bioelectric fields, which can occasionally affect our environments in a bioelectrical manner. But this is not evidence of the soul, just our biological bodies reacting as they should in our environments. And where is the missing scientific evidence on the process of transference from one body to the next? Would it be possible to store this information on a piece of hardware, as the ancient Egyptians and Chinese thought possible with statues? Would it perhaps be feasible to store the information, the essence of a person, on a modern computer? While as far as we know this feat has yet to be attempted, the elite of this world have long dreamed of the advent of this process as an ideal way to survive death. While technological advancement may hold the keys to help humanity unlock this mystery once and for all, modern-day technology has only evolved so far, and can probably, in some cases, only be afforded by a handful of ultra-wealthy people. Beyond this, we have yet to develop technology to transmit the soul, much less the proper hardware to store it. Ideally, the human brain would be the perfect storage device, living tissue for a living spark to nest in. While ancient people performed rites upon the death of a loved one, they believed these rites to be the conduit from one place to another. Do these rites need to be re-examined, put into a controlled environment, to prove that souls can be transferred? Accounts of out-of-body experiences and the like would have to be subject to controlled experiments to be somehow proven, and out-of-body experiences are, at best, random. But even in science, organisms are defined as physical, energetic, informational structures. This idea is reflected in the idea of a biosphere, which is the world sum of all ecosystems. Can the simplest scientific explanation of the soul be boiled down to separating the body from consciousness? Certainly, this can be seen in medical patients in vegetative states, where families hang on to the medical solution because a non-material person is barely clinging on. They swear they are hanging on to that spark, that flicker of humanity that some define as the soul. More and more, science seems to be uncovering that it may be closely related, more than anything else, to personal identity, rather than anything material that can be measured, and there is simply nothing atomic about it. If there is no conclusive, scientifically verifiable proof of its existence, is it possible that it is one of the many names that humans have put to something that we don't yet fully comprehend, but know deep within us exists? Maybe the spark, individuality, and fire that individuals exude isn't the soul, but something else, a concept too large for our tiny minds to even begin understanding in our current state of evolution. Perhaps the existence of one isn't important. Maybe it's about the desire to attain or keep one that is. All over our cultures, art, literature, philosophy, exist beliefs about the soul and the redemption of it, to the transfer of it, to the price that one would pay for it. These stories all share a similar theme of doing good for the cleanliness of it, and doing bad to lose it. This can simply be translated to the human capacity for empathy and having a moral compass, that is, having a compass whereby one follows a moral path. Although the idea of morality is another concept that means different things to different people. To some, morality is nothing but what you make of it. However, in most religions, charity, decency, and setting a good example for others seem to be the staples that is agreed to be the correct path, otherwise known as the path of the righteous. Losing presence and consciousness seems to be an indication of the loss of one's spark. Certainly, anybody who has been near a family member during times of imminent death have borne witness to the presence within a person drifting away. Perhaps the ability and freedom to make choices, whether good or bad, might also be a small part of what we know today as the soul. People seem to be more alive when things are good, and they regress when things are bad. And sometimes the good and the bad that we experience in life stems directly from the choices that we ourselves make. If it does exist, it would clearly be weathered and affected by experience, of which there is no shortage of on this planet. Unique experiences, as well as the memories they make, seem to help us evolve to better understand our environment, our community, our neighbors, our romantic partners, and ourselves. When a human feels love, or even the heightened senses of a sexual experience, we may feel that we are in a different dimension, unbound by our physical bodies and transcending into a higher plane of existence. But maybe that feeling is also nothing at all. Maybe the soul is just a blank screen for you to project your own beliefs onto. Maybe after you leave this earth, your soul will go wherever you think it'll go. Perhaps it's just a concept that all religions share a kernel of truth on. In a mad rush to put names to things that people cannot wrap their heads around, proof seems to come from within us. After all, only 4% of the visible universe has been detected by modern science. Perhaps there is also a relationship between this and science's apparent poor understanding of what lies within us. While making this video, I assembled a short list of what people throughout history seem to hypothesize that the soul is. After looking at this list, I began to understand why the concept has been such a popular one for thousands of years. It contains a basic message of hope, assurance of an afterlife, common sense lessons on morality for embarking on your personal journey beyond the physical body. While I personally don't know if the soul does exist, and certainly science does not help me towards those conclusions, I do find one thought to be particularly true and fascinating. The imminent mortality of a loved one does make humans enshrine each other in remembrance. We remember each other in genetic memory, in pictures, and in all the positive and negative things that we associate with that person. Our soul seems to be what has managed to survive beyond our mortal stay on planet Earth. And for now, I'll go ahead and accept that as my own personal belief.